Good evening and welcome to the KHOU 11 Facebook page. I'm Len Cannon, and tonight we're going to have a discussion about going to school again in the age of COVID. Very difficult work for our educators, and joining me tonight is the acting superintendent of Fort Bend ISD, Deanna Sayavedra. Deanna, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share information about Fort Bend ISD. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so we have a lot to get to tonight. First and foremost, to me, the question that everybody's talking about is masks, and not so much about whether to mask or not, but whether you can mandate wearing masks or not. As you know, Governor Abbott says no mandate. Districts cannot do that. In fact, he's put that on the legislative agenda for the next special session. Now, HISD, that superintendent says, hey, I want to mandate masks. So I want to know, what's your position on masks mandates?
Well, right now in Fort Bend ISD, we are not mandating masks. Our position is that we are strongly encouraging. We know that our students 5 to 11 are very vulnerable. And, that not all of our students that are ages 12 and up have been vaccinated. So, as I said, we're strongly encouraging all of our adults and our children to be sent to school with masks, because we know that masks are, one of the primary mitigation efforts in order for us to contain the spread of COVID-19.
I'm curious.
So it's a very strong encouragement on our part, but not a mandate.
So I know you've been with the district for a long time. Do you recall last year during the pandemic what the mask wearing rate was in the district among students?
We didn't track the mask wearing rate, but what I would say is that our teachers were compliant, because we did have a mask mandate in place at that time. All students and all teachers were required to wear masks to school, and we maintained that position throughout the school year. Once the governor initiated his executive order, we lifted that, and we have followed suit with the governor's order since that time.
Do you agree with the governor's executive order?
Well, I think that it's very important for us to mitigate the spread, and I know that the mask is a primary way for us to do that. It's important for us to respect the choices of our families, and I think that that's an important factor in this particular situation.
So what happens if, and we've seen this happen before, if you have an outbreak of COVID in a school or several schools? What does the district do then?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would say is that we have become very efficient in responding to that over the course of the last school year, having to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. When we were responding in the previous school year, we stood up what we call an incident command center. We deploy a group of people. They monitor data every single day. In terms of positive cases, we communicate with campuses, we communicate with families, and we really look at it on a case-by-case basis. We have 83 campuses in Fort Bend ISD.
All right.
And so, and we've got 11 different feeder patterns. And so what happens at one campus and in one feeder pattern or in one area of the district may be very different than what happens in another. So we look at it by classroom in some cases. If that spreads to multiple classrooms, then we make decisions about what will happen for a particular campus. If we begin to see patterns in a feeder pattern, then we make decisions, as I said, based on what the data is showing in terms of positive cases.
Okay, so one of the decisions dovetails into the questions that we've been getting on Facebook from some people who have children, their parents, in Fort Bend. So let's go to Gunjan Malhotra. She's a mother for a second grader at Cornerstone Elementary. One of her concerns, why can't we have the virtual option with such an alarming rate of infection?
Well, we in last school year, we very much intended to have a virtual option going into 21-22. We had a design team, is what we call it, begin to plan a virtual school option for some of our most vulnerable students in terms of being at risk for COVID exposure. We had a whole application process in place, and we had a plan that we were ready to move forward with. When the legislature pulled back and did not pass the funding bill for virtual school learning, then we set that plan aside, and our position has been to return students to 100% in-person learning. When we look at the budget and the financial cost at this time, it would be fiscally very difficult for us to stand up a virtual school option at this time. It would cost anywhere from $9 million to $17 million, depending on the number of students that would want to access virtual learning.
I had no idea that the cost of virtual learning was so high, but it goes back to my question: if you have an outbreak, would you be able to pivot to virtual learning if you had to protect students?
Yes, sir, we would. As I said, our technology department is prepped and ready to deploy devices should the need arise. We're ready, set to deploy up towards 10,000 devices if we needed to pivot that many students. We also know that there are many students in our school system who have access to their own devices. Our curriculum is on a learning management system that is online. And again, over the course of the pandemic last year, our teachers became very proficient in using our Schoology platform to keep parents informed, to post assignments and information on the website, on the Schoology pages. So we are prepped and ready to pivot should we have to do that, should there be a significant outbreak. So
you're saying, despite the fact that you really don't have the budget, you could go to virtual learning if you had to?
Well, it would not be the robust virtual learning that we were planning for, right? Because the robust learning, virtual learning that we were planning for was a standalone virtual learning school with separate staff, separate administration, with a curriculum that was specific for full 100% online learning for an entire school year. When we're talking about pivoting, that's a little bit different, because we would pivot temporarily and then bring our students back in to the building. And so there's a very different instructional scenario there when you pivot versus offering 100% standalone full virtual learning.
Yeah, hopefully it never comes to that, Deanna, quite frankly.
Right.
Another question that we've got, people are sending in: what are the protocols if a student or students test positive? What notifications will be made? What steps will be taken?
Well, we would always notify a parent if there was a positive case. So we would expect, we have an app. And so if a parent or if a student or a staff member tests positive, they would need to report it to the app. We would communicate to the campus, to the classroom, that there was a positive case. The student would quarantine as necessary, and when they were symptom-free and ready to come back, we would accept them back. In the meantime, we would provide them, if they're able, access to the Schoology so that they could access their assignments and they could continue to engage in learning. Our teachers would reach out to them during conference periods to check in, to answer any questions. So we have a protocol when we know students may be quarantined for short periods of time.
So if a student tests positive, my understanding is the quarantine length of time has changed. So if a student tests positive, they have to quarantine. How long will they be at home before they're allowed back on campus?
It's my understanding that they are quarantined for 10 days. On the 5th day, they would be able to come back or to test if they're positive free within the 5th day and symptom free. So hold on just a second. If they've already tested positive, they would be quarantined for 10 days. They would need to be symptom free and fever free before they could come back.
And would they have to be tested? Would they have to test negative again? Test negative before they come back?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Okay. So symptom free, no fever, and they also have to test.
Negative test.
Yeah. And
After
10 days, and they could come back. So the other question is, do you plan on doing any social distancing this year? And if so, how do you do that?
Yes, sir.
How?
Well, it's 3 feet of social distancing when possible. And, in our elementary schools with cafeterias and things of that nature, our principals have plans to rotate students through so that we can limit exposure of large groups. I know that, in elementary classrooms, although, there's sometimes small group instruction, we're going to be very mindful for the 3 feet of social distancing. So we're asking adults and strongly recommending adults and parents to send their children with their students with masks, social distancing. We've got tight cleaning protocols to make sure that our buildings are sanitary. And in addition to that, regular hand washing for students, allowing them to take frequent breaks outside so that they can be exposed to fresh air. And a lot of the other things that we're recommending that are very practical are, for parents and our staff to exercise healthy habits, keep yourself hydrated, eat well, sleep well, exercise. All of those things that we know are common and practical for us to remain healthy, and that also contribute to mitigating the spread.
So we got another question from Sharon. You talked about cleaning protocol. Sharon wants to know, are you still disinfecting desks? Are you still going to be taking temperatures?
We are not taking temperatures, but we are disinfecting desks. And again, we've got a very tight protocol in terms of the cleanliness of our buildings, and we use the chemicals that meet the standard to disinfect. And we've been using those even prior to the COVID pandemic. So we've always had very strict protocols for the cleanliness of our buildings. And our custodians do a phenomenal job. And our teachers are conditioned now as we've been responding to the COVID pandemic for over a year. And so they've got routines and practices in place that they're accustomed to as well.
And I wonder, last year, we all went through this. Did you happen to know any students who contracted COVID? Did you yourself contract COVID? I'm just wondering.
Well, I would say that I was very lucky that there was nobody in my immediate family who contracted COVID. I did not contract COVID. We, as a family, and myself, have, we followed the mitigation protocols. We followed that in Fort Bend ISD very closely. I do not know any student personally that has contracted COVID. So I want to be clear about that. And I want our families to know that there's a lot of care and concern from not only myself, but all of our staff here in Fort Bend ISD, because we want to keep our students safe. And we know that if we enforce and we follow through with our mitigation protocols, that we can, we will be successful in mitigating the spread. Will there be cases? Yes, there will. There will be cases, and we will respond and support those families as necessary.
A follow-up from Janet about quarantining. She said, if a child has to quarantine for 10 days, will they be considered absent?
Yesterday we received guidance from the TEA, and there is information in the code, the student attendance code that the commissioner shared with us, that allows for us to to continue to receive funding and to account for students who are placed on quarantine due to COVID issues. So there's not a penalty.
Gotcha. I thought that's exactly what you would say. What about the TEA issued new guidance, Deanna, and I think we've got some bullet points, Keith, if we can take a look. So the first one says schools don't have to inform parents of a COVID case, and they don't have to perform contact tracing. So what will Fort Bend do? It says you don't have to. It doesn't say you're mandated not to.
Mm-hmm. Well, we would continue to get, we want to be transparent and keep our community informed. And so we will continue to do that because we think it's an important safety measure in our school district. And
what about contact tracing, like contacting people who may have had contact with somebody who tested positive?
That is something that is done by the county.
Okay, so you turn the information over to the county and then they reach out to see who the contact tracing is? Is that what you're saying?
The county conducts their contact tracing, yes.
In Fort Bend ISD and the rest of the county?
Mm-hmm.
I see.
The county.
Did you want to say something else? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to reinforce that the county will be conducting the contact tracing.
Another point from the TEA, if there is contact tracing, parents can still choose to send a child to school if that child is in close contact with an infected student. That seems to fly in the face of the science, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, the way I understand it, having been on the commissioner's call, again, parents, if a child is deemed to be in close contact for a positive case, they can opt to send their students back to school. The research says that the percentage of people who test positive from being in close contact is significantly small. And so it's our understanding that it's safe to allow them to come back. And so that is the guidance that the Texas Education Agency and the commissioner has given us.
I see. So they could come back to school because they're saying they believe that the percentage of infection among people with close contact is low. You probably know what's happening right now. There is a growing number of young children who are now contracting COVID. And so that probably will have some impact on the district as well. Do you have concerns about that, particularly for children under the age of 12 who can't get vaccinated?
Mm-hmm. Well, we do. We have concerns for our students that are between 5 and 11 years old, because we know that they are the most vulnerable, because at this time we know that the unvaccinated are significantly at risk. And again, I want to reinforce that we're confident that our mitigation protocols and enforcing those will continue to keep our students safe. We're going to monitor very closely, and should we see data that shows us that our mitigation efforts are no longer meeting the need, then obviously we have contingency plans to make adjustments should we need to shift.
I got you. Got a lot more questions coming in, Deanna. Somebody asked about safety protocols, mask cleaning, etc. on school buses.
Yes, sir. So we are going to move forward with our bus transportation as it was prior to the pandemic. However, we are cleaning our buses just as we are cleaning our buildings. And as a matter of fact, I was at the bus barn earlier this week, and I was meeting with some of our bus drivers, and they shared with me the protocols that they would be instituting to make sure that prior to students getting on the bus, that the buses were clean and sanitized. Any time between routes, they will be cleaning the buses as well. And so they've got protocols in place to clean our buses. Again, I'm going to go back to we are not mandating masks. However, we're strongly encouraging every child and every adult to wear a mask as a mitigation effort. And so we would strongly encourage parents who are sending their students to school on the bus to board the bus with a mask because we will be seating students two to a seat.
All right, Deanna, we're getting a lot of questions still coming in. If you're watching us on our KHOU 11 Facebook page, we're talking to Acting Superintendent Deanna Sayavedra of Fort Bend ISD, taking your questions about the school year. Deanna, by the way, when does school start in Fort Bend?
School starts next week on Wednesday, August the 11th.
Wow, okay, coming up really soon. Camelia had this question. It's pretty direct. If a parent decides not to send their children to school, will the district file truancy charges? No,
sir.
Okay, so if they decide they're uncomfortable.
So here's the way the law works. If a student is counted present and part of the district membership on the first day that they report physically to school.
Say that again, I'm sorry. I want to be clear here.
So attendance membership in a school district begins once a student physically attends school for the first time.
I see. Okay. So if they decide, say in the middle of school year, I'm uncomfortable in taking my kid out, there are no truancy charges.
Right.
Gotcha. Somebody wanted clarification. Crystal asked about notifications, Deanna. Will parents be notified if there's a case in their kid's classroom or only if there's been direct contact?
I would say that level of specificity, we would communicate to the parent if there was a positive case.
I think that's what
and
they're
then
asking,
on a case-by-case basis, if there was a close contact, again, we would go back to what TEA says in terms of the parent having the option to opt to keep their child home or not.
I see. This is a question I'd not heard before. Somebody asked, can parents request vaccination status of the kids' teachers?
I would say no. What I would tell you is that we've got about 65% of our instructional staff who has been vaccinated, and about 58% of our non-teaching staff that's been vaccinated. So we have a very high rate of vaccination within our employees in Fort Bend ISD.
And so school starts on Wednesday. What are your thoughts personally about masking up?
I think it's important as I said before, it's a primary mitigation effort. And so I think it's important for to mitigate the spread that, again, that adults that are going to be working with some of our most vulnerable children, those who are unvaccinated, that it's very important for them to wear masks while interacting with students. And I would highly and strongly encourage parents to send their students with masks to school, especially if they have any fear of contracting COVID-19.
Something I want to share with you, and I want to share this with other parents who may be watching. So I have a middle schooler who has all kinds of allergies. I mean, like out of the wazoo. And so we made sure she was masked all during the school year. And I have to tell you, not only did she not get COVID, she had no allergy. She had no reaction to oak or pollen or all the things that she typically, sinus infections. She had none of that because she had a mask on. And it was startling to us and a revelation as to how significant that masking can be. And I know parents have to make their own decisions, but I can tell you from personal experience, it was quite effective, and not just for COVID.
Absolutely. I mean, I would tell you from my own personal experience, when masking mandates were in place across the country, locally here in Fort Bend County in Texas, I wore my mask. And again, I exercise, I have healthy habits, I eat well. And so it's a combination of things, from a personal level that I instituted. And thus far, I've been able to keep myself healthy. So I would concur with your personal experience, that it's an important mitigation effort.
Yeah, this is a great question, Deanna. Somebody said, what is your message to kids getting ready to come back to school Wednesday and they're scared?
I would share with them that we will welcome them with open arms, with smiles. We are going to do our very best to keep them safe. We know that many of our children miss school. I would also tell them that their teachers miss them, and they are very looking forward to seeing them. And we're very excited about being able to engage with them in their learning.
We have talked about social distancing for lunch, in the classroom, 3 feet, you said. How are you going to handle some of the sports activities, the indoor sports activity, the volleyball, the basketball, et cetera?
Mm-hmm. Well, we will open those up to fans, but we will be enforcing the 3 feet of social distancing, and that is what we'll do. We'll strongly, again, encourage those who are spectators to wear masks in an effort to mitigate the spread. But we will welcome our families into athletic venues, again, exercising 3 feet of social distancing.
Will any of the students, any of the athletes be required to wear, not required, but encouraged to wear masks in some of the athletic endeavors?
Again, that is a choice, but we will strongly encourage that because we know that it's an important mitigation effort. Of course, that becomes a significant challenge for some of our athletes, especially depending on the sport, because the mask can sometimes cause other complications in terms of their breathing. So their coaches will work closely with them to make sure that if they do wear a mask, that they are able to monitor their breathing and that it's a healthy opportunity.
I know you've had in-person meetings this week at Fort Bend with teachers and staff. I'm curious, what's the mood for this year?
Well, we welcomed, several of hundreds of our new teachers to do new teacher orientation this week. And we've been, delivering professional learning all week long. And there's a high level of energy. As I said before, our teachers are anxious to welcome our children back into the school building. They're excited to see their students again. And so it's just, it was a great feeling to have our new teachers there with us, and they seemed excited, prepped, and ready to receive our students.
Somebody asked, will the athletes, if you're participating in sports, will they be regularly tested?
I don't have specific information about that. I know that right now that we're specifically looking at instituting, we're looking at the possibility of testing on site, and that would be something that we would continue to look at specifically for our athletes as a mitigation effort. But I would need to talk specifically to the athletic director, and I apologize that I don't have the specific information about that.
I understand. Here's a question. Is there anything that could develop that would but have Fort Bend ISD move to masks mandates?
Again, I think that at this point, as of today, we really are respecting the choice of our families, based on the governor's executive order. Our message will consistently and continue to be that we strongly encourage it, especially because we want to ensure that our students ages 5 to 11 who are unvaccinated, that we can, with our protocols and with masking, prevent the spread within that particular population. And we'll follow closely to see if there's any changes or any adjustments at the state level. And we'll work from there. I can't promise you that we would never get to a point where we would mandate, but as of today, our position is that we're not mandating masking.
Deanna, as we know from last year, things can change from one week to the next during a pandemic. You have your work cut out for you. I thank you for taking the time to answer our questions. Deanna Sayavedra, Acting Superintendent, Fort Bend ISD. They begin classes on Wednesday. I am wishing the district and all the districts a happy, safe, and healthy school year. We appreciate your input. We thank you, everybody, for watching. Continue to send in your questions, by the way, and we will try and answer more of those questions still on Facebook. We'll see you tonight at 10.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.